feel like we need hold music.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's good to see some smiling faces on there. I'm going to give it just a minute or two. I still see lots of screens popping up. Wonderful. Well, it's so nice to see so many folks on here today. And if, I mean, we understand that there's Zoom fatigue. Some folks may be having a late lunch. Some of you may be dealing with stuff in the office. And so while we love seeing your smiling faces, if you need to keep your video off, we totally understand that as well. So we'll go ahead. I think we've got a few more folks that are still planning to join us, but want to go ahead and get started as it's just a couple minutes after 1:30. And I'd love to, I know I see a lot of folks that I know and recognize on the call here today. And Patricia McPherson, it's been too long. So it's great to see some, when I say old friends, I don't mean physically age-wise, I mean folks who have known us for 16, 17 years. So it's so nice to see so many familiar faces. So I will start with myself. I'm Kristen Keeley-Dinger. I'm the president and CEO here at the Healing Trust. And we're just going to take just a minute or two to introduce the Healing Trust staff for those who maybe are newer to their organization and haven't had a chance to meet all of us. Just THT team, if you would introduce yourself and then just a sentence or two about your role here at the Healing Trust. So I will pass it to my right on my Zoom screen, which is Jennifer Oldham.
Hey y'all, I am Jennifer Oldham. I am the communications director here at the Healing Trust. In addition to doing our communications, I also manage the sabbatical grants program and the staff support grants and our internship program. So feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about any of those things. I'm going to pass it to the person on my right, Katherine Smith.
Hey everybody, I'm Katherine Smith. I'm the program officer here at the Trust. I staff the recovery and mental health portfolios, and I'm going to pass it to Mr. Sam Jackson.
Hello all, I'm Sam Jackson. I'm the Senior Program and Community Engagement Officer at the Healing Trust. I manage the physical health portfolio and our participatory grant making programs. And I'm going to pass it off to Abby Hyman.
Hey y'all, I'm Abby. I'm a newer addition to the Trust. I'm currently a program assistant, working kind of behind the scenes in our databases and spreadsheets. I also facilitate our Healing for the Healer retreats. I know I've seen some of y'all there, so it's good to see you again. And I'll pass it to Meredith.
Hi everybody, I'm Meredith Benton. I'm the Vice President of Programs and Advocacy at the Trust. And so I have the pleasure of working with the program team and directly oversee the Healing from Abuse, Neglect, and Violence portfolio, as well as our advocacy grants portfolio, and get to work with all of our grantees and using our voice alongside them to advocate for systemic changes here in Tennessee. And last but not least, I'll pass it to Mabel Davis.
Hey everyone, my name is Mabel Davis. I am actually the intern here at the Trust this year, currently getting my master's in social work through UT Nashville. And I get to do a little bit of everything and work with the entire team, which is super fun. And my time actually here is coming to a close, which I'm super sad about, but I'm thankful to be part of this conversation. I'll pass it back to either Kristen or Jennifer. Not sure who's going to take it.
Thank you so much, Mabel. We have loved having you here and appreciate having another UT College of Social Work person on the team. So just a couple of quick housekeeping items. The first being that we are going to record this session, and that's so that folks who potentially were not able to be here with us today can have the option of viewing it. So just keep that in mind. The other thing is it looks like folks are introducing themselves in the chat box. So if you want to go ahead and say who you are and what organization that you're here representing today, that would be awesome as well. And I'll get us started, and then I'll pass it to Jennifer to give you a little more information about the format for today's session. So first, again, just want to thank everybody for their time, for being here today from wherever you are, whether that's your office, your home living room. We know kind of everybody's in different spaces right now, and it just is wonderful that we can still all be together, even though it's virtually. And second, wanted to say that when we come to this conversation, hopefully you all did get an opportunity to watch the video that we put out a few weeks ago about our new mission and our values. And we released that with a lot of humility and with a huge commitment to our own organization's learning process. And so just so you all know, this is a process for us. It's not a destination. We don't think we've reached any sort of ultimate conclusions about anything. And even though we've been doing this work for a few years now, we really see ourselves as beginners, as novices, and just really starting to really understand this process and what it means to us as an organization. So we're not experts, nor do we pretend to be, nor do we play one on TV. And we really just want to walk alongside you and with you with this process. And we are really just very committed to being transparent and honest with you about where we are. And that means that we may have some responses today to some of your questions that are, we don't know yet. And in fact, that's what we say a lot these days, is we don't know quite yet. And so I would just ask for grace and patience as we figure this out, as we work with our team and board to really flesh out this work for our own organization. The other thing is that you all collectively, I think we've got 50 some of our grantee partners here today, and you all collectively represent so many different and various nonprofit organizations all across our geographic service area, from Nashville to Cumberland County. And so there just is not going to be a one-size-fits-all approach. So I'm going to sort of lay that out now to say, we don't have a checklist for this. There's no one-size-fits-all approach. What works for us may not work for everyone else. And so we come to this with just, a lot of curiosity, a lot of humility, and wanting to be partners with you all as we figure this out. So that being said, if there are questions that really are very specific to your organization, we may want to address those on a more one-on-one basis. So you all are individually encouraged to contact your program officer, whether that be Sam, Katherine, or Meredith, if there's a very specific question, or as we go through, if it looks like this question is really unique to a specific organization, we may ask for you to wait and have follow-up individually with your program officer. So we are still working through a lot of the details on this. So it may be that we have to follow up with you anyways about it. Our goal is to really announce sort of the more, I think, institutional-wide changes as it relates to our grant program in June of 2022. So I will say that while we may say today, we don't know the answer to that, know that our plan is to answer those questions hopefully by summer of next year, and then implement them in 2023. So the goal is that you would have at least 6 months of heads up before we make any major changes to the grants program, or changing to the eligibility criteria in a way that may mean that your organization is not a good fit anymore. And that may happen. So we want to be really honest about that too. It may be that when our eligibility criteria changes, that not everybody who has been a current grantee partner may be eligible going forward. But please know that you will have at least 6 months of a heads up to figure that out. And the other thing I wanted to say is just that we know that that change takes time. I mean, we've been doing this work for a few years now, and we're kind of just to this point, and we know that over the next year, we're going to be working hard with our board and our team to figure out what the next iteration in a more racially equitable foundation looks like. And we don't expect anyone to implement change overnight either. So we're really committed to one, being very transparent, but then also knowing that organizations may come in and out. So it may be that even though your organization might not be eligible in 2023, that as things change, that maybe your organization becomes eligible again in the future. So we also commit to keeping you updated. Jennifer, as our communications officer, will put changes on our website, send out newsletters, send out communications so that you all know what's going on with us. So all that being said, I will pass that now over to Jennifer to talk a little bit more about the structure of today's session. Thanks.
So today, your fingers are going to do a lot of the work. What we've decided to do to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to be heard is to ask you guys to enter your questions into the chat. If you're not already muted, please mute yourself. I think that'll help minimize any background noise. We had one person say they couldn't hear us. Please type in the chat whether or not that's still the case and let us know so we can see if we can figure that out. But whatever questions you have, feel free to ask it there. It's likely the same question that someone else has, and a member of our staff will respond to it. And we're going to go ahead and start with some questions that were submitted ahead of time. But go ahead and get those fingers working in the chat box. So the first question we've got is, will the Healing Trust be pivoting who they award grants to based on the racial makeup of clients served?
I would take that question, Jennifer. We haven't decided on how the eligibility criteria will change, but we will be prioritizing funding organizations that are led by people of color and those that serve people of color. While we may consider white-led organizations that serve people of color, we will be mindful whether those staff members of that organization are reflective of the community it serves.
Awesome, thank you, Sam. An additional question we have is, what sorts of things are you encouraging organizations to do in light of your revised mission? Let's go with, let's see, who wants to take that on? Oh, let's toss this one to Meredith.
Sure. Thanks, Jennifer. So like Kristen said, there isn't necessarily a checklist that we're going through to see who fits, who doesn't fit. I think as we've gone through this work, one of the most important things that you can do is to first look internally within your organization before you start to do this work externally. And so there are a variety of different workshops, trainings, there are resource guides that have now been created for nonprofits that can help guide internally, looking at your hiring practices, looking at your the operational procedures that you have as an organization, to see, are there things that you may be inadvertently doing that are perpetuating white dominant culture or white supremacy thinking in ways that we may not have identified or understood. And so really looking internally to your organization to see where are there opportunities for you to advance racial equity internally. And then I would say, based on what you learned through that, to then look externally and see how are you serving Black people and other people of color in the community that you serve who could be eligible for the types of services that you have. And then, working through a process to find out how best to engage those individuals to make sure that they're being served, whether that's through your organization or through another organization. So I would just say, first of all, it's about looking internally within your organization first, and then looking externally to ensuring that the people most hurting in your community have access to your services. And if they don't, then examining why that is and what you can do about it. So this is about creating change within our own organization, but just like those of you all who do advocacy or who have done collective impact work, this is also about changing how you do your own work. If you're actually applying a racial equity lens to your organization, both internally and externally.
Thanks, Meredith. Katherine, we have a question from someone who serves a rural area. It says, we serve predominantly white, rural, poor, and underserved counties. So we're concerned about what that might mean in terms of funding for us.
Thanks, Jennifer. So Healing Trust, as y'all know, probably know, we've served the 40 counties of Middle Tennessee ever since our inception, and we do not plan to change that. That being said, we understand that many rural counties are not as racially diverse as some urban counties. That's not true across the board, but many times that does apply. We feel at the Trust that even if the population of people of color is small in your community, they are still worthy of your time and investment, and also your access to services. And if you do serve people of color, it's important that those folks are represented on your board and on your staff, so they are reflective of the people being served.
Thank you. Meredith, we got a question about boards. Carrie asked, will you also be looking at board diversity as a part of your new eligibility criteria?
Perfect. Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, Carrie, for this question. And if you've been around the Trust and had a grant reviewed by us, then more than likely you've heard this as feedback that we've given for years now in regards to board diversity. So again, it's not going to be a checklist. There's not going to be a one size fits all for this, but I would encourage, all of you all to be looking at, do you have representation in all levels of your organization, but particularly at leadership within your organization. And that includes at the board level. We just hosted a workshop with Sarah Bounce as the facilitator to talk through this issue specifically. Again, what we want to do is make sure that we're not promoting tokenism. So it's not about having a body in the chair or anything there. What we want to make sure is that your organization is prepared to have leadership from Black people and other people of color on the board, and that representation is inclusive, and that those voices are able to be heard within the boardroom to help affect the direction of your organization.
All right, there are 45 of us on this call. I know somebody has another question that they just haven't put in the chat box. What do you want to know? What can we answer for you? I'm just gonna wait a second.
Hey, Jennifer, while we're waiting, one of the questions that we got beforehand was a question about looking at other marginalized populations and how would we prioritize different populations other than by race. I think it was asked by one of our partners that works in the disability community. And so I'll address that. I mean, while we have been intentional about being explicit about having a racial equity focus, we also understand that that other marginalized populations have been deprioritized in funding as well. And so those will be things that we will consider too, as we take an equity focus. We'll be prioritizing racial equity, but we'll also be looking across the board at other types of equity too, and looking at other marginalized populations. And so we definitely understand that our friends who work with people with disabilities, folks who work with the GLBTQIA population, and many others will be things that we will be paying close attention to, and making sure that we're trying our best to understand the intersectionality between those issues. So again, this is not something that we're experts at by any stretch of the imagination, but we do understand that folks have historically been disenfranchised and undervalued and underprioritized, specifically, and I think most relevant to the racial equity work, looking at Black populations across our service area, but also we understand that that other populations also suffer those same issues.
Thanks, Kristen. Kelly has a question about participatory grant making. Can you talk about participatory grant making and how that is a part of our equity lens? Sam, can you chime in on that?
I can do that. And I will say participatory grant making one more time, and then I'm gonna call it PGM because I've learned that it's a mouthful. So if you hear me say PGM, that's what I'm referring to. We're excited about the PGM program that we're having here at the Helen Trust. And this is just one way we're looking into reaching out into the community. This new program is a concept that a lot of organizations across the country are using in order to get feedback from the community and to get buy-in from the community. The way we are using participatory grant making is we're reaching out to a rural and urban area here in Middle Tennessee, putting funds in those counties and allowing those citizens to decide where those funds are going. Our approach is to be totally hands-off in this, just putting those dollars there, letting those individuals decide, hey, this is what we see needs to happen in our community. We're hoping to take those lived experiences that these individuals have and let them decide, okay, these are the things that we see. For so many years and for so long, philanthropy has dictated where the dollars go, deciding what organizations to fund. Now we put that access into the hands of the people, and that's what we're hoping to do with participatory grant making. And we know that there's many different models. This is totally new to us. We're going to try this approach first, and there may be another model that we'll try somewhere else. But for right now, we are definitely fully engaged into doing this work. We have decided to put $100,000 into the Bedford County community and another $100,000 into North Nashville. Those programs are already up and running, where they're bringing together a committee of residents at this current time in order to get the process started. There are two totally different models. One is more with 10 residents within the community in Bedford County. In North Nashville, there are 10 residents, organizations, totally different approach in how they're going to do the money. We're also partnering with community partners in those areas. In the rural area, we're coming together with a community clinic of Shelbyville, Bedford County. In the urban area, we're going to work with Corner to Corner in order to get those funds out. So you'll be hearing more about that soon. We're looking forward to the great things they're going to do, and hopefully this will make a change in those communities.
Thank you, Sam. So we have a question about timeline. Pam asked us, would the trust consider communicating a year in advance rather than 6 months out when an agency is no longer a fit? Says, I'm thinking about a longer runway for budgeting purposes. Depending on timing, it's possible an organization has already gone through the budget process and then learns a significant funding source is eliminated. Kristen, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, Pam, I certainly understand that. And I think we'll see. I think there's a balance between the urgency of knowing these changes are really necessary, and it's something we've been working on and wanting to do, and that even COVID kind of pushed us back. We had hoped to roll these out earlier, but then for those who have been grantee partners of ours, we last year said we're just going to fund everybody who we've been funding at around the same level. So it's kind of already pushed us back a year from what we had hoped to be our initial rollout, which we understand and wanted to be good partners for folks who have been longtime grantee partners of the trust. And I don't know if for those who were with us in 2016, the way that ended up, we made some changes to our grant program because of a pension, I'm not going to get into it, but a settlement with the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corp related to our founding, and which meant that we had to reduce some of our grant priorities at that point in time. At that point in time, we gave everybody 9 months, and it just was based on the fact that we wanted to get it rolled out within a calendar year and start our Q1 and Q2 and Q3 and Q4 grantees having the same eligibility criteria across the board through the same year. And there's also the issue of kind of multi-year grants too that we're having to contend with as well. So there's multiple moving pieces in all of this. And so we're making our best to kind of satisfy all constituencies involved, while knowing that this is also really important and that we want to do this work in the best way that we possibly can and start to prioritize these historically underserved communities. So I think I appreciate it, and we will do our very best to give you at least 6 months notice. I can commit to that right now, and we'll certainly take into advisement that a year would certainly be better, and I definitely understand that.
Thanks, Kristen. So we have a few advocacy agencies on the call who might have a similar question. For people whose grants end 12/31/22, when do they reapply for an operating grant? That was referenced in the prior email.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer and Libby. I saw that. So that means you are Q4. Even though it starts on January 1, that means you're in our 4th quarter grant cycle. So then you'll apply in the 4th quarter of 2022. And then the hope is that the advocacy grants would be open for Q1 1 of 2023, which normally has a January or February application deadline.
Awesome. Okay, so this question says, how will you weight or balance policy and procedural changes and hiring versus the timeline necessary to actually achieve substantiative change? I will toss that to Meredith. Can you take this question?
I'll take that. Again, so I think it's safe to say we don't know at this point. I think if, regarding the question around timeline and everything like that, I think if, if it is surprising to hear, or if it is a challenge to your thoughts that Black people and other people of color have health outcomes that are different than other populations, then there may be additional work that needs to happen within your organization to understand the implications of those health disparities and those health outcomes. And so again, it's not going to be a checklist of like, here are the things we need all of our grantee partners to do in order to achieve funding here. I think we'll expect to see progress. And so how are you able to demonstrate the work that you've done to be a racial equity focused organization, as well as ensuring that your services are available, accessible, and received by Black people and other people of color in your communities that you serve? Does that answer the question?
And I'll just piggyback off of that, Meredith. We've been on this journey for quite a while, and it takes a while, and we understand that. And so we are, like Kristen said, we are by no means experts, but you will have an opportunity to discuss your process and your journey if that's something that your organization chooses to do with our team or your program staff member. So that's something that we want to have an open dialogue about, and we're all ears and happy to provide any brainstorming or any technical assistance that will be necessary.
Thanks, Katherine. So we've got another question about operating grants. For multi-year advocacy grantees applying for an operating grant in 2022, that is a mouthful, how will the maximum request amounts apply to collective impact initiatives whose budgets are relatively small? What say you, Meredith?
Yeah, so I'll say for all of our multi-year advocacy grantees, one of the things we'll do is we'll start our budget process in August and September to see what the numbers, what our grant numbers are going to be able to look like for 2022. And so what I'll plan to do is reach out to each of you all at that time to talk through your request amount. It will generally be related to our operating grant guidelines there. But with that said, we'll also be looking at your current request amount level, because we know some of those that would be a significant cut from what you get currently. And so I'll have a one-on-one conversation with you all about what the appropriate request amount will be for the 2022 operating grant.
Perfect. So this question isn't in the chat, but we have received this recently. Are you going to start funding social determinants of health? Sam, you want to take that?
Yes. We haven't decided this yet, but we understand social determinants of health have a large influence on health, but it's more than likely that we will fund some parts of that at some point. But like everyone has said prior to that, we're still having conversations about this and what it will look like. But yes, it seems like we will be going down that path. So.
Awesome, thank you. And another question we have that's not in the chat is, if the Healing Trust will be pivoting to look more closely at the racial makeup of clients, are there any suggestions for what organizations with predominantly white service areas can do to remain in consideration?
Sure, I'll take that, Jennifer. Just to reiterate what Meredith said, there's really just not a one-size-fits-all approach for this work. Every organization will need to look at their mission, have conversations with their board members, with their staff, and discuss what implementing racial equity work will look like for them and to their culture and to their organization. What you're going to need to do, your organization needs to do, is different. Even in the same community, it'll be just that could be potentially vastly different. But like I said earlier, you will have an opportunity to discuss this process and explain the steps that you're hoping to implement with your program officer during the application process. And just want to say again, it's said before, it's not a checklist. There's not something that we're looking for in particular at this time. But I think it's important to say here that we want to make sure at the Trust that people of color on your board and on your staff and even clients as well, we want to make sure they're not being tokenized. So that's important to keep an eye out as you're doing this work.
Perfect. What else? What else is emerging for you? A lot of you look very thoughtful. Feel free to ask a question. We've got about half an hour left. So if you do have more things you want to know, then feel free to type them in the chat. I'm checking. All right, nothing yet. Did we answer all of your questions? I mean, we did, like, oh, Carrie's like, one moment. Okay, cool.
Either that or we just don't have answers for all their questions.
Well, that's probably more likely.
Hey, Jennifer, can we put links to Calendly? Or is that somewhere where folks can, so if you all are thinking, gosh, I have a question, but I really like to not have it on the Zoom, recorded Zoom, and I'd like to talk to my program officer about it individually, you can make an appointment. Katherine, Sam, and Meredith all use Calendly to schedule appointments on their calendar, and they would be happy for you to schedule a time to talk with them individually as well.
Give me just a second. And I will do that. I see something popped up.
While you're doing that, Jennifer, I can take Carrie's question if that's okay.
Okay, cool. That'll help. Thank you.
Okay. So in regards to people of color, Black people being tokenized, that's really when, and there's lots of definitions. I'm going to explain how I understand it, but when a person of color is filling a position on a board or in leadership, but they're just filling that position because of the color of their skin and not necessarily for their expertise or their lived experience. And they might not be able to have the voice that they need. And they're really just fulfilling a seat at the table and don't have a voice at the table. If anyone else wants to weigh in on that, there's lots of different ways to think about that.
And I could chime in. This can happen at all levels, even with ordinary staff. The conversation goes, are these individuals' opinions valued within the organization? Are they just used there to check a box? And we talk about, can we have a checklist of what you need to have as an organization in order to apply? And that's why we don't want a check box, because we don't want people just checking off saying, I did this, but you're not really changing the structure and the lens of your organization for the benefit of the clients you're serving. You're changing it for a grant. So just take that in consideration whenever you're bringing on interns or people of color, staff members or board members, making sure that the culture is ready to have that person there, and that you are valuing their opinion and that they do have a voice at the table.
I saw a question pop up around, sorry to play you, JMO, or Jennifer. I saw a question pop up, other health funders nationally looking at health equity. The answer to that is definitely yes. Across the major health national funders, I would say, have been looking at racial equity for a number of years now. Robert Wood Johnson, probably being the most well-known to everybody, has really adopted a racial equity lens to their work. And in fact, if you look kind of at what they're doing now, a lot of their funding strategies around social determinants of health and other things have been brought forth because of their racial equity focus. So in some ways, those of us in Middle Tennessee might be a little late to the game if you're comparing us to the national funding perspective. And then other funders that do other types of work, from Kresge to Kellogg to the Ford Foundation, most all have implemented some sort of racial equity work to what they're doing now.
Kristen, just to elaborate on that, also there's a whole host of funders here locally who are also doing this work. So we definitely have to give props to the Maddox Fund, who is even further ahead in their journey through this than we are there. But also want to talk through, like, so yes, a lot of national and local funders are looking at racial equity, regardless of the sphere that they're in. And I know many of you all work in adverse childhood experiences. How many of you all, like, raise your hand if you're an organization that works in ACEs and adverse childhood experiences? Awesome. So y'all know that, and we have seen how the approaches that we take to help children who have experienced trauma, by focusing on them and setting up resources and systems and processes and programming, they actually benefit all children. But the reverse isn't true. Everything that benefits all children may not help those who have experienced trauma. And so that's a very similar approach to what we're talking about now when it comes to health equity and to racial equity, is that by focusing, we know that Black people and other people of color have more disparate health outcomes than the white population. And so by focusing on solutions that improve their health and hopefully eliminate those health disparities, we'll actually be putting things in place that improve everyone's health, not just Black people and other people of color. And so that is kind of our theory or our understanding. And we'll give our $100 millionth away this year as the trust. And as we look at the next $100 million that we give away, we hope that we'll be able to look at how our residents and communities of color were impacted by that $100 million that allowed us to achieve health outcomes across the board, not just within those populations, but for everyone. But we need to focus on those most hurting in order for us to achieve those, because we know that the reverse isn't effective.
Awesome. So I popped those links into the chat. So if you have questions and you want to discuss this with your program officer directly, you can schedule a meeting with them. There is a question that says, can there be a running Q&A as questions and answers arise so that we may know where we are in real time as it relates to information? We will have some sort of FAQ on our website related to this. So if you do continue to have questions, we'll just update that and you'll be able to check back regularly about that. And you'll get an email probably next week that summarizes and explains a lot of what we've talked about and what was also in the video that you all saw. But yes, we are happy to have an FAQs that we keep updated during this process.
Yeah, and we're committed to continuing to be open and transparent with you all as decisions are made along the way. Those decisions just haven't all been made at this point now. But we will continue. I hope we have a reputation, thanks to Jennifer's leadership, of being very open and transparent and communicative with our grantee partners. And that's something that is going to continue even during this time of uncertainty. As we create more certainty, you all will hear about it, and we will make sure that we are open with you all about that, because we know that the decisions that we make affect the work that you all do, and we don't make these decisions lightly.
What else? What would be helpful to know? We've got a few more minutes left. I can't tell whether or not people are typing. Okay. I'm trying to look through y'all because I can't see all of your faces. So I'm trying to look through to see if it looks like anybody has a question. Okay, well, we've got about roughly 15 more minutes. Thank you, T. Allen. We appreciate you being here. So if anything does arise, let us know. If something arises after this, also let us know. You can either, use those links that are in the chat to email someone directly. You can use our contact forms. You all know how to reach us. And we are happy, as Meredith said, and want to be very intentional about being transparent with you all about where we are.
And I'll just second that. Thanks everybody for your great questions today, for your participation and your feedback. And yes, we want to do everything that we can to answer the questions that you have. And as we have answers to them in real time, we'll try to keep y'all updated too. And just to give you a little more background, we talked about the timeline of next summer. The work that we're doing right now, we're working with our equity leadership team, which is a mixture of staff and board, to really flesh out our equity point of view. And then that work is leading into a new strategic planning process that we're doing in conjunction with the equity work. Our current strategic plan concludes at the end of this year. So we're hoping to have the new strategic, at least a new strategic framework with a theory of change really hopefully approved by sort of winter 2022. And then that work would inform the specific details about any changes to the grant making program. So that's why we're on sort of the timeline that we're on, is we're doing a very intentional process with the team and the board of grounding the strategic framework work in the equity work first. And that being said, I just, again, appreciate everyone's time today and willingness to ask questions in this forum, and just know that we're open and available to y'all at any time. So just thank you so much for all that you're doing and for sticking with us for so long, many of you, and particularly this past year. It's been a challenge. I know I've been trying to reach out individually to our partners to just, check in and see how y'all are doing. And if you haven't heard from me yet, you will be hearing from me in the near future, because I just want to know what's kind of going on with you all on a personal and professional level. And just thank you all so much for being great partners with us. And we'll talk to you soon, and hopefully see you in person at some point in the not too distant future. So y'all take care.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, y'all.